Good morning, good morning, good morning. I see here we have Chester, one of my favorite people. Mr. Samba, good morning.
Morning, Tafat. How are you?
Morning, Annie.
Morning, how are you?
Good, thanks. Pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
Morning, Nesta. Morning, Sheu.
Good morning. How are you?
Hi, Musa. All right, so I'll just like to go through some housekeeping issues. I'm just going to briefly stop my screen share here so that we can explain a few things. So on the bottom left, for those that are using their computers, PCs, on your bottom left, you have your mute icon, and we really would appreciate if you could keep your mics on mute. This will help so as not to distract the facilitator. And then when we move on to those that have just joined us, my name is Michelle Kwati, and it's a pleasure to have you join us. And then after the mute icon there, we have our video icon. So the video icon, for those that would like to show face, like Franco there, hi Franco, we can use that one. And then when we move on to the next icon there, we have the participants icon. So this icon is for us to see who's in the meeting. And yeah, so if you want to see who's in the meeting, you can use that participants icon there. And then after that, we do have our chats platform there, and we also do encourage for those that want to contribute, ask questions, whenever we have a facilitator presenting, please may you make use of that chats platform. We would really appreciate that. And if you want to speak directly to someone else in the meeting, you have just below your chats platform there, you have where it's written to. If you click the drop down arrow, you will receive a list there that has everyone in the meeting. So you can click directly whom you would like to contact, so that we don't have a lot of private messages in our public chat. And then we do have my favorite icon, the reactions icon. When you do click that reaction icon, you can see we have a lot of things. We have thumbs up, we have clapping hands, we have laughing face emojis, we've got fireworks. So anyway, during the presentations, you feel you need to express your emotion, please use those reactions there. If you're in sync with what the presenter is saying, please give them a thumbs up. If you want to celebrate, please give them the fireworks. And yeah, if you feel something funny has been said, don't hesitate to laugh using that laughing face emoji. And then we also have those yes, no, slower, faster icons. They would really help us. And then we have your raise hand emoji there. This will help us if you need to contribute something using audio. you can use that icon, and then we can allow you to share whatever contribution that you need. Please also remember to put your hand down whilst after you're finished, and then the very last red button there is the leave meeting icon. So going back to our presentation, I think welcome once again to those that just joined us. We're very happy to have you join us in this meeting. I think we can proceed now. I'm just trying to display my chart there so that I can also see your contributions. So this is our panel for today. I think we will be going in depth with what they will be offering us today. Welcome to today's session, where our NGO boards getting it wrong online seminar, and we're very happy to have you here. So maybe before we go into detail on today's session, I'll just like to talk about KFM consultants in just a brief. So our vision as KFM consultants is to see transformed societies through a financially sustainable and well-governed NPO sector. So you will find that we have three main pillars that we work with. Initially, we did start with offering financial management services, and then we did realize that in order to achieve the vision that we want, we would also need to incorporate governance and sustainability there. So under governance, we do work with organizations to build on their credibility by putting in place strong governance structures that will not only result in increased accountability and transparency, but will also ensure that their interventions are effective and sustainable. So the services that we do offer under governance at KFM Consultants are board establishments. We can help you develop board charters. We can also help with your board induction, board policies, and also advise on governance best practices. We also do have board review services as well. We do appreciate that we at any given point you do need to evaluate the skills, the competences, and the strengths and weaknesses of boards. After we have done that process, we also offer board training. This can be orientation or reorientation for those that would have been privileged enough to have an orientation session. We also do offer risk governance. So due to time, I think I'm just going to go on to the next slide. Today, this is our program lineup for today. I think introduction, I'm really happy to see that people are contributing there in the chats platform. Welcome, Valerie. It's nice to have you join us. So we're just going to have an introductory session for now, and then we will get into the business of the day with our first facilitator being Tsitsi Maradze, who's going to speak on the common mistakes that NGOs make. We will have our second facilitator here, Mr. Kudzai Midzi, who will then speak on the best practices from the eyes of a board member. And then we also have Dr. Luke, who will speak on safeguarding the NGO space and the role of the NGO board. We will also then have a wrap-up and summary from Mr. Midzi, and then we will call it a day. I think we had also indicated that our workshop is to end at 12, but if you will forgive us, I think due to the content, we also realized that we won't be able to make 12. but I'm sure that by 12:30 we will be done. I'm sure it will be worth the extra 30 minutes. That right there is one of our facilitators, Dr. Luke. He possesses quite the impressive profile, as you can see, with more than 25 years of experience in the governance sector. I think we can also just see how impressive his profile looks right there. We do also have Tsitsi Maradze. I think this is a very phenomenal woman. I think we can all agree to that. She is a coach, a development consultant, and organizational and institutional development practitioner. We're really glad to have you on board, Tsitsi. Thank you for taking your time to share your experience with us. She does have more than 20 years of experience within this sector. So as you can see that our panel is full of people with rich experiences. It's a very well-learned platform. We then also move on to our facilitator again, Mr. Kudzai Midzi. He is the managing consultant with KFM Consultants, and he is a well-seasoned finance professional. And if anyone can testify, for most of those that have worked with us, they can testify that Mr. Midzi will go over and above his call of duty just to make sure that we provide the services that we would have written that we are going to provide. We do extra just because of his excellence and his vision. So I think without further ado, I will call upon Mr. Midzi to take over. We do have a poll that we will be running.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. It's really exciting to see so many people. I think this is a topic that has generated so much interest, and we're looking forward to the time with you. I know we've introduced ourselves in the chat box. We just want to get to know you a little more. So we've just put there a poll. If you can just fill in, I think there are 3 or 4 questions. So we just get a better idea, 3 questions actually. Just we get a better idea of who we're interacting with. We just want to know where you're logged in from. We want to know what you do. And then we just want to get a rough idea of your experience in NGO governance. I saw Ufulu from Malawi, so it's good to have you on board, Ufulu. It'll be good to see where other people are logging in from. Yes. Isabel from Mozambique. I forgot to put Mozambique there, but great to have you with us. Nesta from Australia. Great questions you sent us, Nesta. We will tackle those today as well. Great to have you joining us as well. I wonder, what time is it in Australia now? Is it evening yet? Six p.m. All right, so later on in the day, we're starting our day. It's 10 a.m. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Just a couple more minutes for everyone to just fill in the questionnaire. Tarida, I hope you can now hear us. Fantastic, from Kigali. Good to have you logged in. Scope Zimbabwe, yeah, we've seen all the fantastic work you're doing here actually. So great to see some familiar organizations and faces as well here. From Ghana, fantastic. Thank you, Richmond, for joining us. It'll be really interesting to hear your experiences in Ghana and how governance is there and what sort of challenges or even best practices that are coming out of Ghana around governance. I think we're all here to learn, so looking forward to be learning from each other. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the poll now. Thank you everyone who shared responses. Just looking at, I'm going to share the results for a bit. I hope you can all see the majority are from Zimbabwe. We've got 2 from Malawi, we've got 2 from South Africa, and 4 from other countries. I think we saw Rwanda, we saw Mozambique, we saw Ghana. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I forgot the 4th one there. And then who do we have? So we have a great mixture of people. We have board members, we have executive directors, finance, program staff as well. We've got self-employed people in the public sector, private sector, students, and other professions as well. So it's great to have such a diverse representation, and we're looking forward to getting input from everyone. And then in terms of the board experience, we've got current board members, we've got people aspiring to be board members, people who've been past board members as well, others with no experience to date, and others who just want to come and learn. So fantastic. And thank you for sharing that information with us. It just helps us to get to know who we are dealing with. Yes, we will share. There was a question if we're going to share. We'll share both the recording and the presentations to everyone who signed up for this workshop. So we'll definitely share this at the end. And so I think, yeah, we've taken quite a bit of time to kick off. Tsitsi, I hope you're ready. I know you're not feeling too well. Your voice hopefully will not run away from you today. So please go ahead and take over, Tsitsi.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Tsitsi, and I'm a human rights activist, a gender activist. I work as an organizational development professional, as you have just heard. My sincere apologies that my voice today is not at its best, but I hope you can all hear me. It's such a pleasure to work with KFM, Kudzai, and your team. It's always an honor to be given an opportunity to share from the little experience that I have. And I hope that everyone will get an opportunity to actually perhaps contribute, build on the knowledge that I'm going to share with all of you about what I have come to learn and to know about governance. And hopefully we can also build our own organizations so that they can become better, they can be more effective, and even more professional in everything that you do. So I just want to take you through very briefly what I've come to learn and what I've come to know, and in the hope that you will also contribute to this conversation in a manner that will also equally enable me to build on the experience and the knowledge that I've acquired so far that I'd like to share with you. So just take what I'm going to share as perhaps a teaser. I don't know everything, and this is not everything to it, but just something for us to reflect on. My experience in the NGO sector spans slightly more than 20 years now, and therefore I keep learning with every intervention and every opportunity. And therefore, I just want to start off by perhaps clarifying from my own perspective what I've come to learn and what I've come to know about governance, especially in the NGO sector, which is also a civil society sector, and just trying to distinguish it from managing. We decided that perhaps to just facilitate this particular segment of the program, it would be great if you can collect your questions in the chat, like Tafadzo has alluded to, so that I'll quickly take you through my presentation, and then we can have a conversation about what I would have shared vis-a-vis what you also want to learn, want to contribute, so that we can strengthen this space and everyone can actually benefit from it. So I've come to learn actually that governance is about making sure that the organization is working to fulfill its mission. And this is different from management, which is essentially more about controlling, directing, organizing the daily affairs of the organization. And this is where the director or the senior management would also come in because they are responsible for that. Having said that, I also wanted to unpack a little bit more some of these terms. So I have come to appreciate that governance is really what the board does. And this is very important, especially in the current context, because we have realized even with COVID that some NGOs are getting stuck, others are actually failing to function, others are excelling, whereas others are also forming. And therefore, when we talk about governance, what is it really that we can actually focus more on? And I believe that the key responsibilities of governance, especially through the board, is to make sure that they are the custodians of the vision, the mission, and the values. They are also responsible for financial oversight, which is usually referred to as fiduciary responsibility. They are responsible for monitoring organizational performance. Because in this era, we realize increasingly that the relevance of any organization also has a lot to do with what they are putting out there. What difference are you making as an NGO? And therefore, what results can actually be ascribed to the work that you're doing? So the board is equally responsible for making sure that you are actually performing according to the requirements of the vision, the mission, and also walking the talk according to what your value statement is. The board is also responsible for ensuring that the organization is sustainable and also financially sustainable, meaning that they have a direct responsibility for checking the quality of the vehicle. I'm seeing the organization here as the vehicle that is actually carrying the work of the organization. And therefore, what kind of vehicle do you have? Is it a helicopter? Is it perhaps a tractor? Or is it a bus? And is it fit for purpose? So that means the board also needs to make sure that the vehicle that is actually carrying this work is appropriate for the kind of work and the kind of results that are expected to be delivered at the end of the day. So this is different from management, because management is actually the work of the director and their staff. And I actually note that there are three key responsibilities. Management is responsible for translating that vision and the mission into the work of the organization and making sure that the expected results are actually coming through. They are responsible also for working from a functional structure that makes it possible to deliver on the mission and the results. So is the structure amenable to what you are standing for? And does it actually enable you to do the work as you have promised and to deliver the results as you have promised? And the management is also responsible for making sure that the policies, the systems, and the procedures actually also edify the values of the organization. You are responsible for walking the talk in terms of what the organization stands for. And therefore, this is usually encapsulated in your policies, in the way you do business, the way you interact internally and externally. Overall, management and board equally have leadership responsibility because they give direction and inspire people to follow that direction towards an agreed and desired destination, which is what is stated in the vision and the mission. And therefore, collectively, management is responsible for leading the organization at the operational level, as the board is responsible for strategic leadership, meaning they have to make sure that they maintain that bird's eye view and the intentions and the purposes of the organization are actually realized at the end of the day. So when you talk about NGO governance, we actually acknowledge that the governance by the board needs to have a legal standing. It needs to be justified. So it derives this authority from what I'm calling its legal persona. And this can be actually the constitution or the trust deed, however the NGO is registered. That gives you the clout, that gives you the permission to do the work that you have to do. And in there, usually the boundaries of authority and accountability are actually stated. So governance in this context is therefore primarily concerned with how effective the board is performing against these key responsibilities as encapsulated in that constitution or in the trust deed. And boards are important, especially for asking the right questions at the right time before problems arise. So that means the board needs to respond to their responsibilities, making sure that they are keeping a very close eye on what is happening operationally. But again, these responsibilities would also need to depend on many other local conditions and structural factors of the organization. For example, are you leading a membership organization, or are you providing governance to a membership organization or not? Because the way you'd actually carry out that role will also differ from an organization which is actually just not membership driven, but is just there to satisfy a particular cause out there. The role also depends on the size and budget of the organization, as well as the staff. How many staff members? What is the size of the budget? So that at the end of the day, you don't have an overload of board members vis-a-vis staff. For example, you might be having an organization that actually has 5 staff members, and yet the board has got 12 people. You can see that there's something wrong there. So you always have to adapt and adjust according to what is required. I know that in this era of COVID and also these other challenges that we have all gone through globally and even in Zimbabwe, you might have shrunk the organization because of financial dire straits, but you would also then need to check what is the ideal manner and role and function and size of your board to suit your organizational intentions. The board's roles and responsibilities are also located in the history of the organization and how long it has been in existence. I would imagine that a newly forming organization of youth or concerned with youth empowerment might actually be just starting, and therefore it might actually start up with a board that has more people than its staff, because you are still forming. This will be different from a board of an organization that has maybe more than 10 years experience or even 50 years experience. So you need to also always take all that into account. Also remain mindful of the environment in which you're operating. At times you might need to shrink the size of the board in the organization. At other times you might even need to expand it. That's always the bottom line. And you need to be conscious of those realities and those facts. So I just want to quickly also walk you through the roles, the generic, we call this the generic roles of the board, because they cut across sectors. Every board that is working in the civil society space would somehow mirror these roles and responsibilities. But of course, they can always be customized to the specific requirements of your sector as well as your own organization. Like I said before, the board is the custodian of the organization's vision and mission, meaning that the board always needs to make sure that the vision is there and the mission is also there, and they're equally understood. And in their strategic leadership role, they need to make sure that whatever decisions are being made are actually satisfying the requirements of that vision and the mission. Your role is to make sure that there is that connection. The board is also responsible for hiring and firing the director, as well as senior staff. Usually, the senior staff that we speak about is the director and the finance person and the most senior person responsible for your programming. The rest of the structure are the responsibility of management. You are also responsible for assessing the performance of the executive director, so that you are also assured that they are living up to the true intentions of the vision and the mission, as well as ensuring that the organization has an effective strategic plan. I always argue and say, if an organization doesn't have a strategic plan, usually it actually reflects on the capacity and the competency of the board. Because how else can you provide leadership? You actually need a roadmap, you need something to guide you, and usually as a board providing effective governance. Your key roadmap, your highway code, is the strategic plan. And I always argue that if an organization doesn't have a strategic plan, it actually reflects a certain level of inadequacy of the board. The board is also responsible for ensuring that the organization has adequate resources, be they human, financial, equipment, material, however else the resources are required. You need to make sure that those resources are available and they're accessible in sufficient quantity and quality in order for you to actually achieve the results that the organization is seeking to achieve. Again, the organization is responsible for ensuring the organization is managing those resources effectively and efficiently. This is why you actually need to make sure that you have on the board all the necessary competencies and skills that enable you to provide the sufficient oversight in terms of how management is doing it and what they are prioritizing or not, so that you can also give them sufficient guidance and support. Otherwise, you're also responsible for monitoring the organizational performance in relation to that strategic plan, which also then means that for every program or project that the NGO is implementing, it's your role to make sure that it's feeding into the strategic pillars and the strategic objectives or goals of the organization. The NGO should not just implement projects without making this connection. Otherwise, you run the risk of what we call goal displacement, where you're just chasing after projects because that is where the money is, without connecting it to what the organization stands for and what it seeks to achieve at the end of the day. The board is responsible for enhancing the image of the organization and making sure that you're jealously guarding it. You also have responsibility of the legal and ethical integrity while maintaining accountability. That means those values that the organization has got, you as a board member or as the board, you equally have to walk the talk. You cannot be one thing when you are on the board of this organization and be something else or somebody else when you're outside of it. And that's why it's always important to align your personal values around ethics and integrity, as well as accountability to those values of that organization. Again, you need to recruit and orient new board members, as well as assess your own performance as a board. And this is where a board charter can actually help you so that at least you know what you are joining. If you're joining as a new board member, you know what you are committing to do and why. And equally, the other board members will also enable you to be accountable to them as they are also equally accountable to you. So there's that aspect and element of mutual accountability within the board. So having said these basic roles, I wanted to set the scene so that at least when I speak about the common mistakes, hopefully we can relate them to these basic roles and responsibilities. So one of the most commonest mistakes that actually has compromised integrity and performance and sustainability of NGOs has to do with recruitment. I've seen that where the board is made up of friends, they cannot hold each other accountable. They do not actually focus on the real substantive issues. And there's a tendency of being trivial. And usually in board deliberations, usually in meetings, there is a lot of group thinking. So there's that one person who always says the trigger thing and everyone else says yes, yes, yes. And the board also rubber stamps a lot. They rubber stamp what the director says. And when you recruit friends and not professional colleagues, you can see that your accountability is already compromised, your integrity is already compromised. And this is what we call a captured board. because you cannot rise above your friendship relationships. To the extent that I've seen that Tsitsi will sit on a board for KFM because she is a friend to Kudzai. Kudzai will sit on Tsitsi's board as an organization, and the two of us will also sit on other colleagues' boards. So what that means is we are sort of recycling certain tendencies that perhaps do not augur well for the effective performance of that organization as well as the results. At times, organizations recruit names instead of recruiting skills. So Kudzai is known to be this financial guru, expert consultant in this area as much as Tsitsi could be. So because you want a certain level of clout, you don't even check Kudzai or Tsitsi's track record in the work that they do. But because you just want a donor to perhaps be sensitive to your proposal, you just invite Tsitsi to sit on your board. And before you know it, we are again circulating the same things, group thinking, we're capturing each other, and so forth and so on. I've also seen that some board members are more concerned about enjoying public trust out there, the image, instead of being accountable. So it's always good to say yes, yes, when you're invited to join a board, because it makes it look good on my CV when I say I sit on this organization board and so forth. But when you really look at how I am discharging my role, when I am sitting on that board, I don't even ask the right questions. I'm always, trying to look good in the face of everybody else. And therefore, I'm also contributing to, I think, a situation where we are not even accountable, and therefore we're not even relevant to what that organization is saying. Maybe I don't even attend meetings without even any excuse or apology, because I know Kudzu understand, because he's my friend and he's the chair of the board, and I don't even need to, follow the due process, because the constitution will say, if you miss 3 consecutive meetings, then you've naturally fallen out. But Kudzu as the chair will not sanction me because I am his friend, and he will not even raise it in the board meeting, and neither would the other board members. And then at the end of the day, you actually have board members whose names remain on the name of the organization, but in terms of their contribution, there's nothing to show for it. The other mistake is that there is no proper formal orientation, because if there is proper board induction, it will enable you, for example, to check how far are your personal values as a board member aligning to the organizational values, as well as the principles and ways of doing business. Let's say I'm a board member of an organization that pushes for rights of marginalized populations, key populations, for example. And then I agree to sit on their board, but really, I don't respect their dignity as individuals, as key population groups. So on the one hand, I just want to put that I am a member of this board, but personally, maybe because of my religious values or my other cultural values, I am speaking against those key populations in other spaces. So that already creates a tension and a disconnect, and that we need to be mindful of. Because we said one of the roles of the board members is to be the public image, maintain the public integrity of that organization. So if I'm the one speaking against them as sex workers or gays and lesbians, what does it then say about me as an individual? Then moving on to the size of the board, like I said, it needs to be fit for purpose. A board should just be enough to actually satisfy the requirements of the mission and the vision. And usually, according to the constitution or the trust deed, that is already started. But it doesn't mean that it cannot be changed. You can always review that. But the bottom line is you need to make sure that as a board, you're also checking if you have enough competences, enough experiences on the board in order for you to discharge your roles and functions effectively. At times, I realize that board members just agree to be on the board, but they're not even clear about the boundaries of their responsibility with management. And this is a perennial source of problems. How far does the board go in leading or providing strategic leadership to the organization? And how far does the board get into the nitty-gritty management responsibilities? Remember, I said earlier, the role of the board is to govern, meaning the role is to oversee. It's not about micromanaging. The moment you see any board member being so frequent in the organization, telling the director what to do and what not to do, sitting with staff and trying to, that already creates a certain level of dysfunction that can cause a lot of tension between the board as well as with everybody else. So we need to be very clear about when we say our role is governance, how far do we go? Usually your role is to just safeguard the intentions of the mission and the vision, guided by the strategic plan, and give that guidance, but not to do and take over from the director. And before you know it, the board member is the one sitting in the director's chair and they're ordering everyone around. That is wrong. And then accepting to be a board member without being clear about your own role, your own contribution, and what is expected level of commitment and your accountability for results is a recipe for disaster. Before you accept, just check that organization out. Check what business is it into? What are its values? What is it that is expected of you as an organization? And can you commit to that? Usually I find board meetings are happening maybe 3-4 times in a year. Are you available for quarterly meetings? Or if there's a crisis that needs to be managed and the board has to meet more frequently, are you also available to provide that kind of support? Because that's really what the organization is requiring of you. But if you're not always available, then it means you're already compromising the capacity of the board to guide and to lead the organization. Another key mistake is that there's no culture of performance appraisal. You don't appraise the director because after all, they are a friend. You don't even appraise the key managers and the rest of the staff so that you're able to check whether they're performing to the required standard or not. And when that appraisal is done, what then becomes of the results? Are they sufficiently and consciously used to improve effectiveness in the organization or not? Or you just do it as a way of ticking boxes because it's required for you to then look good to a donor. Again, when you look at the structure of the board, does it benefit from the available skills, competencies, and experiences of every board member? Or you all just meet as a full board every quarter. So your role is just to meet every quarter. But what's happening in between? And when you look at how those meetings then become structured, are they structured in a way that optimally enables every board member to also contribute so that at the end of the day, your role is actually furthering the business of the organization as well as supporting, especially the management in their management role. This is why you realize that subcommittees play a very important role. The board subcommittees are a way of making sure that you can actually allocate each other very clear roles and functions. And you are able, before the next board meeting, to meet and to contribute and to make determination that can actually help the management to do whatever it is that they need to do. This will also give you the opportunity as a board member to actually even get to know more what the organization stands for and what it does. And using your best practice experiences and your knowledge, you're also able to provide that guidance in detail at that level, so that when you meet as a full board, you're not taking half a day in your board meeting and you're discussing everything in detail. I'm going to make a comment about board meetings later, but I've realized that where a board has got subcommittees, it tends to function better. It tends to draw on the skills, the experiences, and the competencies of other board members much better, and therefore it becomes much more effective and efficient. The other mistake that boards make is that because you have a treasurer on the board, and usually this is the person like Kudzai, who is a financial guru, right? So the board just delegates everything financial to the treasurer. And it's the treasurer who is much more knowledgeable about everything, and the rest of the board doesn't. They don't get interested to understand how do you read a variance, or how do you do a variance analysis, and therefore how do you read your income statement or your variance analysis report, or and so forth and so on. So it also then means that every board member needs to have some functional literacy about financial information of the board so that you're able to understand and interpret it. But you don't necessarily have to be a guru in that area. This is where the treasurer would then come in as the expert. You draw on their wisdom, you draw on their knowledge to then guide and lead the rest of the board in making a proper determination about financial management and accountability. This is an area that many donors in their due diligence check before approving a proposal, for example. They are very fussy about, because this is this is the area where trust with your funding partner can be compromised to the extent that they never want to see you again, because you cannot keep proper books, you cannot even account. At the end of the day, it's not even the responsibility of the finance director or the bookkeeper alone. When the organization is said to have been compromised financially, it is also a reflection of the fiduciary responsibility of the board and to what extent it has been discharged effectively. And then the board also does not get involved in fundraising, but they want to provide fiduciary responsibility over resources that the organization has got. This is an area that causes a lot of tension between management and the board, usually, from my experience. But how can the board then fundraise for the organization? Maybe it just requires you as a board member to open the right door. You know that you have your networks. You can actually recommend certain individuals of influence to actually consider, a proposal that's coming from an organization, because you have your friends in those other areas, in those spaces, and it's okay. Equally, you can help them to do a good concept note that is bankable, so that at the end of the day, the funding partner can also say, yes, we can try this out, or no. It even means, always looking out for any potential opportunities for that organization to get funding. It can even be from your own work, or even from your own other networks. I ascribe to many LinkedIn platforms, and from time to time, I actually realize funding opportunities. And my role is just to recommend to the director, oh, have you looked out at this? The World Bank has got this, or this other whatever platform, fund, what is it? NGO funds, where you actually can subscribe, and daily there's something being put out there. Do we also look out for those opportunities as board members, so that the organization can also benefit from that? So that's how you can also contribute to the organization's fundraising. Another mistake is that there's no culture of accountability, meaning we don't necessarily live true to the requirements of the Constitution. For example, the Constitution actually states the term limits that must be respected. So you can be a board member for 2 years consecutive. After that, you have to step down. And this process of board renewal is not necessarily always followed. And then at the end of the day, you actually have larger than life board members, and also larger than life directors, who can even be founding directors. Your role is to make sure that whatever the Constitution says about renewal, actually enforcing it. Yes, it would be good and cozy to be the chair of this or board of this organization, but you must also be prepared to let go. The directors, especially the founding directors, these are people who are usually activists. They have a very strong passion around the core business of the organization. They all also have an idea about how things should be done. But if you let those directors remain forever in the organization, the downside of it is that they can actually make the organization stuck, because they will not allow new ways of doing things. They will not allow innovation. Besides, maybe the founding idea now needs to be packaged differently. Let's say we're talking about women and girls empowerment. We know that women and girls empowerment is almost like a perennial issue, and it can take many forms. But when this organization started, they were looking at gender-based violence. But because now they're 20, 30 years into the business, they also realized that the same target group now requires economic empowerment, maybe through businesses or what we used to call income generating projects. But we know that the income generating projects that we used to have yesteryear, where women will be given machines and asked to mobilize themselves and form rural clubs, that model is outdated. We are not talking about circles. And then the director is insisting, no, we need to find rural women and we form them into cooperatives and into clubs. And then the director is not willing to let go of that model. They can actually compromise the sustainability of the organization, and then the organization remains stuck because no one is willing to fund women's clubs anymore. It's done. Move on, you know? How can we then innovate? So at times, the board, your responsibility is also to make sure that maybe you let go of your founding director and look for another director who has got that savviness to move the organization into its next dispensation. But of course, remaining respectful to the role that the founder is actually played. So when you see that the organization is failing to move, it might be that they recruited friends on the board and they recruited names on the board. And because of that relationship, they cannot make tough decisions. It can also be that the director of management is allowed to actually dictate the agenda of the board and how the board should function. Because of that groupthink, because of that captured nature of the board, it already means that the director is the one who's running the show. And yet we said there has to be clear boundaries of responsibility between governance and management. The other problem is that there's no schedule of board and subcommittee meetings. And therefore the calls for meetings, for board meetings, it's ad hoc. Because I cannot plan in my diary to say, oh, the quarterly meeting for this organization is on this date, and therefore I need to make time. So when the director says, oh, we've got this crisis, we're always firefighting, and we're always in a crisis mode instead of being structured. This also can compromise the availability of board members, because when there's no clear schedule and the call for meetings is done, it might be that I'm not available, not because I'm not committed, but it's just that the timing of it is so wrong and I didn't know, you know? So it also then means that if we're going to be working smart, we need to make sure that our meetings are structured and it's clear when we are supposed to be meeting. Now I come to the issue of meetings. Oh my God. Board meetings, in my view, as part of good practice, I think they should not take more than 2 hours. 2 hours maximum, otherwise an hour and a half. When meetings take too long, usually it's because they are lacking focus and they are not even making decisions that are expected. And they're going into the nitty-gritty operational issues that the management should be responsible for. At times, meetings take too long because the director themselves cannot make a decision. The role of the board is to strengthen their decision-making capacity. You need to push back and say, no, it's your responsibility to make that decision, and you come to us and tell us what you've done about it, and then we can also see whether it's a sound decision. But where the director is not getting the support of the board, it also then means that, and also where the board is not working through subcommittees, it means that you have to discuss every nitty-gritty in the big board, and therefore, obviously, it will take a lot of your time. And this just puts off a lot of the people because most NGO board members are volunteers. They are not paid. So they are making sacrifices of their time to contribute to the organization's mission. And therefore, by taking too long, you're already usurping their perhaps capacity to do other things, make money, for example. And then at the end of the day, you see people stepping down because they cannot just put up with this level of dysfunction. The board might also in those meetings be focusing on trivial issues. And trivial issues can even be management issues that needs the management or the director with their senior persons to just sit down and make a determination so that the board remains in their deliberations, focusing on those strategic issues So what is the budget? And who is the money from EU come through? What is our burn rate for this program? Are we on track? Are we meeting our targets? And so those are the strategic decisions. How is this project linking to our mission and our vision? Those are the kind of strategic questions that you need to be asking. Instead of saying, so how much in allowances are you paying? Is that the right kind of allowance to be paying, and so forth? Because already you need to have a structure that states very clearly what are the allowances that your staff can get, including even the allowances that the board can get when they sit. Because the duty of care requires us to only get an allowance when we turn up for a meeting. So at times we have too many meetings because the board members also want to get these allowances, which is so wrong. You should not organize a board meeting in order for you to access an allowance. The meeting should be fit for purpose. The meeting should actually be one that enables the organization to function effectively and optimally. And you also have board members who turn up for meetings unprepared. So the director would have circulated the agenda and the board pack, maybe a financial report, a director's report, and any other reports that needs to be reviewed. And then the board members turn up. One, they didn't get the board pack. So the director is also at fault because you are not helping the board to be effective and efficient. Two, the board members did not have time to review what the documents in that board pack, which also then means that when you're then deliberating, instead of asking maybe for a summary of what the issues are that need a decision, you are starting by unpacking what exactly the issues are, and therefore who did what and where and why do we need this. So you can already see how meetings then tend to take forever. So meetings are very important, and the chairperson is very much responsible and accountable for the conduct of these meetings. They should be able to say, we are going to make these decisions, and therefore the way they guide and manage the meeting should be such that they're able to ensure that the board makes that decision. And at the end of that meeting, the staff and the senior management and the director can get on to do the work that they need to do. If you have a board meeting and a decision is always deferred, for me, that's already an indicator of a board that is really not effective in their governance role. The last mistake that I wanted to share relates to conflict of interest. Let's be honest. Board members, staff, donors, whoever else is involved with an NGO has got an interest. We are all interested. It's just that the nature of our interest and the extent to which it exerts influence in what the organization does or does not do is what then creates conflict. So we need to make sure that as board members, we are actually in our deliberations and in our determinations, ensuring that we are serving what is in the best interest of the whole organization. And therefore, our decisions are not giving preferential treatment to some individuals or a special constituency or a special group. Because some of these NGOs, maybe I recommend my son to be given an attachment opportunity in this organization where I am sitting on their board. So when a decision has to be made, I should not take into consideration the impact of that decision on my son's attachment in that organization. In fact, I should even disclose to the rest of the board members that I actually have got my son who has been engaged on an attachment to do ABCD. So that if the board has to deliberate on an issue that is affecting the area where my son is working, I should also recuse myself so that I don't contribute to that decision. Otherwise, I'm in conflict. The conflict of interest can even be in the recruitment of a director. So today, we have assessed the performance of the director and we decide that maybe we need a new director. Before you know it, we fired the director, and the next day, the chairperson of the board is sitting in the director's chair. What does that say about us as an organization? Especially if the reason, the rationale and justification for it is not sufficiently communicated to the rest of the staff and also to our stakeholders. It can even be conflict in relation to how we award consultancies. Because I know that my friends or my relatives are also into consultants and the organization requires a consultant to do A, B, C, D. Or maybe I am actually the consultant. How do I then contribute to the organization's business without creating a conflict of interest? And also, the third point is that maybe my objectivity is also compromised. So we don't necessarily exercise fairness or ethics or personal integrity in the manner in which we make decisions, because I am for the director. After all, the director also maybe allowed my grandmother or my village to benefit from a project. And because of that, the director is always flagging it. Remember, we have our project in your village, and therefore you cannot do this. And then the director exerts undue influence on me. And because I also want my village, my clan, for example, to benefit, because maybe one of them is a community facilitator, and I therefore do not disclose that. I don't also make objective assessments in my contributions to the decisions that the board has to make. You will recall in Zimbabwe, we actually had a situation early in the year where someone from the ministry was actually arrested because at the end of the day, they had a number of their relatives involved in a project and getting allowances. That is a direct conflict of interest. And then the last point has to do with gifts and favors. So a board member will accept gifts and favors from someone that they do business with and without following due process. Usually the constitution or the trusted is a clause that sanctions this, to say if you're going to get an acknowledgement in whatever form, it can be cash or in kind, how do you respond to that? And it's stated. So that's the due process that I'm talking about. You always need to go back and say, no, in our organization, we're not allowed to do this, or we cannot accept this gift, or if we do, then you should know what to do with that gift so that it doesn't benefit you personally and not the rest of the organization. So, yeah, I thought this could get us started in a conversation about what to do and not to do, you know, in NGOs. Thank you so much. Back to you, Tafazo.
Thank you very much, Tsitsi there. I think if we could say commitment was a person, we would call it Tsitsi. I think a lot of people would would agree to that. I think this woman has soldiered on. I think, you know, she did explain to us that she's a little under the weather and her voice was a bit not at its best, but I think she soldiered on. So please help me by just displaying some fireworks there. Everyone, please just put some fireworks to appreciate Tsitsi's effort. Just because I think she's done a phenomenal job. Ooh, 7, 8, 9, 10 fireworks. Yes, thank you. A lot of fireworks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciation for Tsitsi, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Means a lot to us. Yes, thank you very much, Tsitsi. To those that have just joined us, we had our first speaker, Tsitsi Maradze. She just finished. And we have 2 more panelists that are going to speak. My name is Michelle Kwati, and I'm your host today. I think I don't know, Tsitsi, if you would like to add anything, but I think we had reserved this moment for Mr. Midzi, just so that he can speak, and then we'll take questions all at once after his presentation. Okay, that's good with you. Mr. Kudzai Midzi, if you're available.
Thank you. Michelle, this is why I wanted to speak first, because, you know, it's always going after Tsitsi. But I loved her presentation. And I think I found that I wanted to speak from the viewpoint of a board member in best practice, but she's touched on so much of the stuff that I wanted to touch on. I'll just reinforce, but maybe do it quickly and not take as long as I'd expected to take on the presentation. So I've had the opportunity to serve on a number of boards, both private sector and NGOs. And I think what I wanted to do was just to reflect on some of the things that I came across and thought as, when I was thinking of this workshop, to think, what would I advise other people before they join boards? So maybe it was really more towards board members that I wanted to speak to. But you will see it's just the other coin of a lot of what Tsitsi was saying. So for me, the most important thing is around aligning your vision. I know it's prestigious to be a board member. You get approached to be a board member. It looks good on your CV. But as Tsitsi said, take a look at the organization, and understand your own aspirations and values and visions as well. Do you see an alignment in that? So it's not always that when you're approached to join an NGO, you should agree. So I have, on occasion, then turned down some invitations to join boards, because maybe the work that they do, I'm not maybe believing as much in it. I don't know enough about it. I don't really see myself being able to add value. So it should be possible for you to say, thank you for inviting me, but no thanks, because maybe our visions don't align. And to use an example that I really liked, you can't be, for example, homophobic and sit on the, Chester, I'll use your organization, my apologies, and sit on GAL's board. You can't be an atheist and sit on CCJP's board. You can't hate animals and sit on SPCA board. So it's important for you to then see, what is it that the organization is doing? What is it that I enjoy doing? Because your contribution and the value you bring will be affected by how much you buy into what the organization is doing. So I think that is very critical, and maybe the first thing for you to consider. What is your why? Why do you do all the things you do? Is that the same reason that you see this organization you're going to be a board member doing what it is that they do? And I think the second one for me was then to clearly understand what is expected of you before you commit. And again, an example I was going to use, my personal example is, I'm invited a lot of times as a treasurer onto boards. And there's nothing as bad as seeing that, what, it looks like it's all up to me as a treasurer to ensure that there are systems in place, that donor relations are maintained, that audit reports are put out in time. And so know what it is that you're signing for, know what it is you're taking responsibility for, because I think it's such a big issue to then say, okay, I accept this appointment. Make sure then that maybe there are systems to support you. Those subcommittees that you spoke about are so important. I mean, if you look at finance, you're not going to be able to do it on your own as a treasurer. You need to have a subcommittee to assist you, but you also need other board members to be literate as well financially, so that it's not a one-person expectation that you will then, as a board member, ensure all these things as well. But also know the time expectations as well. And then around the terms of reference. So I think it's key to have that clearly set out. And for organizations, that's what I would say really. When you invite someone to join a board, make sure then you also at the same time are clearly letting them know what it is you expect from them. And this can be in your terms of reference. A lot of times we just leave what's in the trust deed as the guiding document and maybe what's in the constitution. But you find that sometimes this is not enough and is in summary. So what you might then need to do is to make sure then you have a board charter that then elaborates a lot more in terms of what is it that is expected. And also clear terms of reference that you write out to people and say, as a board member, this is what you're expected to do. Because I know we have lots of instances where you get board members overstepping and almost acting like managers. So it is clear to then make sure then that is just, they understand and you clearly set out as an organization your expectations of them. And then you as a board member, you know how far you can go. It's important for me to know as a treasurer. So what do I do if I have a problem or if I want a question? Do I just go straight to the finance officer and start asking, or is there a process, or is there a procedure? Do I know I can only speak through the chair who speaks through the executive director, or do I have to approach the executive director or then approach the director, the finance manager, or can I just approach staff members? So it's so important to then set that out so that everybody is clear on expectation. Third one for me would be to know the organization. And it's amazing how many board members don't really know their organization. You discuss the history of the organizations, you see people are not too sure. What is the organization doing? It's hazy, it's the wishy-washy talk of what they do. So you wonder, one function you want them to do is to assist with resource mobilization. How then can they talk about the organization if they don't even understand what it is that the organization is doing? So I think it's important, things like those elevator pitches that people do. Even board members should be able to do that. In a minute, can you talk about your organization? Because when you go to the next meeting where there are funders there, you need to be able to sell the organizations as much as the director, as much as the staff are able to. Because maybe you also then interact at a higher level than staff would. So that opportunity might not fall on staff, it might just fall on you as a board member. Even when you travel, just on a plane, you don't know who you're going to meet up with. Are you able to then sell your organization? So it's so important for you to understand the organization and what it's doing, but also to understand things like policies. I saw a comment there that said board members are the first people to go against policy. You'll be amazed how many don't even know the policies of their organization. But those are the people that are approving all our strategies, or maybe just approving payments, but you don't even know the contents of your finance manual or of your HR manual, of your admin manual. It becomes so important then for you to be able to not understand and be familiar with the organizational policies that you're dealing with. But also familiarity with the people you're dealing with, I think, is key. Do you understand your fellow board members? Because as a board, you're a team. And as a team, your effectiveness is affected by how well you work together. So it's key as well as board members to understand how then do we function, understand how your chairman functions, understand how your executive director functions, what sort of leader is he, is she, what's their leadership style, because that will help you to then assist with oversight and with strategy as well. So for me, it's key, even when we do the orientation or team building for board members, it's key to do those simple personality tests that you do. The Myers-Briggs or the 16 personality test, do that. And then it will also assist you to function well as a board, to relate well with your director, because then you understand what sort of director you have, what they respond to, and how to get the best out of them. Because I think as a board as well, part of your role is to inspire as well the staff to be able to give their best, but also to work effectively as a team as well. My fourth point was just understanding why you are a board member.
Sorry, Mr. Midzi. I had mistaken you. I wanted to mute a participant and then I muted you. Sorry about that.
All right. So I think at an individual level, it's also important to understand why you've been asked to be a board member. Be clear on the value that you're bringing. What are you bringing to the table? Why were you selected? We heard about the captured boards because you're friends with the director, where it seems at times the board is taking directions from the director itself. So I think it's critical to know why you're there. Is it because you have a certain skill? Are you adding value? Who are your allegiance to? Is it to the organization and its vision, or is it your friend who has then let you in as well? But for the organizations as well, I've seen directors who then are hesitant to say, we're not too sure about bringing in people we don't know, or even board members themselves when they need to fill in. They also want to look within their small circles. So it's key for us to look as widely as we can. How are you identifying your board members? Why are we not seeing NGOs in Zimbabwe, for example, advertising for board members? Why are we not seeing people applying and making it a competitive process? It shouldn't be a favor that someone comes and sits on your board. They should come there because they're coming to add value, and you need to look as widely as possible. I know that there are issues around security, maybe civil society itself. You're not too sure about some of the people that might end up on your boards. All that you need to take into account. But for me, it's key, I think, to then make the process as open and transparent as possible. And it's key to then make sure, as board members, as the chair, you are aware of how then you are building your board. You know, the first board, I think the first boards will really always be ones that founders pick. I think it's rare at the onset because it's also important to know the development stage of the organization. But as we grow, it should be possible for us to diversify and grow our board as well, so that we're getting in all the right skills that we need as well. And now, you know, we're no longer limited by geography. Your board members just don't have to be in Malawi because you're in Malawi. You can now get a global board in place. So it's key to also, I think, as widely as you can, because exposures are different, experiences are different, and you'll be amazed what you can benefit from getting people that are coming in from different environments as well. And for me, one of the biggest things about the board was waking up one day and then taking the newspaper and then seeing the organization I sit on making headlines for corrupt practices. Yeah. Bank accounts had been frozen because there was money laundering involved. And I'm thinking, what? No, I'm a board member and I'm the last person to know this. And you'll find in most cases, that's what happens. Board members will be the last people to know. You know, so for me, it's critical as a board member. It's your duty to make sure you don't get caught unawares. You know, 2018, I remember sometime, yeah, it was to do with USAID, maybe it came out in the papers. Some NGOs working with USAID were accused of being corrupt, of diverting funds, of working with local staff in the agency to divert funds, and names were even written out in the paper. And you know, I'm just wondering, I wonder if board members are even aware that there's something like this. You know, so it's so important, I think, for me to be able to be comfortable as a board member that you've got it covered. I don't know, I hope that makes sense. You know, sometimes you're not even sure, is everything correct? Is everything running as it should be? Then you need to ask yourself as a board, how can we then make sure that everything is running as it should be? And it's to do with the type of reports you're getting. How much input are you putting into the information that you're getting? Or are we then just leaving it to the executive to just give us a report? But that doesn't really tell us much. Let's, I think, be able to question and ask for the right sort of information that we want, so that we get that comfort as well. But also, I mean, just meeting as regularly as you need to. In the instance where I got caught by surprise with the headline, I didn't realize later on that actually we hadn't met for we missed the last 3 board meetings that we were meant to hold. And then you discover you're not keeping up to date with the information. So I think it's so important as well. But also then just reading the materials. I think we heard about just rubber stamping boards. Do not be that. You know, read the materials and question as well, because then that will enable you to get that information that gives you the assurance that everything is working well as well. So I think it's so key not to get caught unawares, but also know within the systems what's there to assist you, because then you can't be going, you know, down to the level where you're going to the organization and saying, I want assurance we're paying Zimra, so I want to see all the payments for Zimra or for NASA. It's key to understand how at board level you can still provide oversight without stepping on the toes of management. So it's key then to make sure then that, you know, you understand the functions of internal audit, for example. Internal audit is there to then ensure that internal control systems are reliable. And then they are reporting to you as a board. You need to understand around risk management, what's happening. Are you getting, you know, information on how you've updated your risk registers? So it's important to understand what's the purpose of this risk register, and then how do I as a board member use it? So it's so critical that you use the systems that are available to you as a board member to understand and to be comfortable with what's going on as well. One thing is you can't really know it all as well. I think that was another point that I had. Even with diverse skills that you have, it's rare to then know it all. I'll always appreciate. I think it was around 2012 or so. I was sitting on a board, and with so much change is going around in the financial sector. And then the organization brought in a chief executive of one of the banks. And for me, that was such a useful session. We spent, I think, an hour with him, but we received so much input into the environment, into possible ways in which we could operate, and stuff that maybe would not have come out if we just left it to ourselves as a board to try and sort out. But even around COVID now and what's been happening, if you need to bring in experts in that area, just get them to come and talk to you as board members, and you'll be amazed how that can assist you as well. And I think for membership organizations, that's such a big area, especially where you're getting board members elected, where maybe people are just board members out of popularity, for example, or where there are limited skills within your membership. Then it becomes critical to then maybe get those ex-officio board members to come on board and to assist with different skills that you will not have within your membership. If it's there, I mean, it's critical to tap into it, but you will find sometimes that you will not have that skill within your membership, and you will need to then bring in experts as well to assist you. Of course, membership organizations, I think there are questions we'll look. We got some great questions yesterday on issues that trouble membership organizations when they then call in these experts, and maybe members feel that they're now taking over almost. So it's important to also then just make sure then that people understand and what it is they're there to do as well. But critical, the seventh point for me was about not overstaying. Don't overstay in the board. And I think I've been guilty of that myself as well. I remember I sat on a board for almost 9-10 years. But in the end, it's almost like a social club. You're actually part of the system. You're no longer questioning as much as you should be. You're not providing, that bird's eye view that's needed. So I think it's so critical to serve and then to leave and to be regenerating the board as well. But it also means your policies need to clearly state that, and then to then indicate, how many terms can you serve. For me, if I 3-year term, after second term, I'm asking myself, do I really need to do a third term? I think then maybe it's important to bring in new people, but also to then make sure we're just rotating so that you don't get a board leaving all at once, and then you have new people coming in that might not then understand the organization as well. But also just questioning the value you're adding, I think it is important as well. The worst time I felt as a board member was when I was on a board and the organization was failing to pay salaries. And I'm thinking, so what are we doing here? Just coming to have tea. How much value as board members are we giving the executive director to our assistants to sort out these problems? So it becomes key to also then just see and to constantly research as well and see how you can assist the organization that you're in as well. And that evaluation system, not just for our ED, but for ourselves as board, is important. How much are we evaluating ourselves as a board? Are we setting targets for ourselves as a board? So it's important to then know what are we hoping to achieve this year as a board, and also at the end of the year to then reflect and see at a personal level, how have I performed as a board member? The chair, we can assess the chair as a board. Together as a board, how have we performed? And there's nothing wrong with stepping down from a board where you see yourself not adding value. People will continuously sit on a board just for the sake of being board members, or maybe for allowances if they're allowances. But I think it's critical at an individual level to question the value you're adding and to be able to sit down. But also for the organization itself to have a system in place that enables non-performing board members to be identified and then weaned off or retired off, so that we make sure then that there's benefit in having a board member. Number 9 is around, for me, the voluntary nature of membership. So in most cases, it's a voluntary thing being a member of a non-profit board. And I think it's critical before you accept it, to accept this and to appreciate this, because you are maybe going into what might turn out to be a thankless job at the end of the day. So it's key for you to understand, I am coming in as a volunteer. What does it mean to volunteer? What is the sacrifice that's expected of me in terms of time, in terms of skill that comes in? You need to understand that before you accept it. Because I think sometimes we go in, and then when we're in, we start complaining about the lack of allowances and how it's taking all our time. But it's critical to understand that before you're going in, you're doing this as a volunteer. And that's where it's critical, I think, for me, for you to then align what you do, what you aspire for with what the organization is doing, because it becomes easier for you. For the organizations, I mean, it means we need to be looking at how then can we keep our board members motivated, because we know maybe they're not getting those allowances. Are there other ways that we can what can I say, reimburse our members? Or how can we get them involved in activities? Because sometimes, what someone just needs to be involved in the activities you're undertaking as a board as well. So it's key, I think, to then look at that. Critical as well, I mean, it's to then look at it. And we're seeing more and more NGOs now starting to say, but why aren't we paying sitting allowances? So I've come across a number of organizations that have been able to mobilize the funding from their funders for sitting allowances for their board members. So if that's possible, I think, why not? I think for many of us, it's so difficult to conceptualize that, because we've always known NGO board membership to be voluntary and maybe not to be paying allowances. But let's keep our mind open to a new school of thought that says, if you can, why can't you, pay your board members sitting allowances? So I think that is something as well. And the issue of conflict, I think it's so big. You just need to make sure you avoid being conflicted. And in addition to all the things that Tsitsi mentioned as well, is around board members then providing a service to the organization. It's important for clarity in terms of that. Is that something that we can do? Can we pay board members for providing a service? And for me, I always think, if it's not, I mean, maybe as a last resort, if you can get other service providers and if the funding for it, then go that way, because then it becomes easier for the board to then monitor the work. But it can be really difficult for the board to then monitor the work of one of their board members, particularly if it's not up to scratch or quality. How then can you, censor yourself or censor yourself as a board member? Or can your other board members censor you if you're producing poor quality work? So I think it's so important. And the last point was around then the issue of strategic meetings. And then just making sure then that you're avoiding never-ending meetings that are focusing on executive things that management could easily have taken account of. So I just wanted to share a resource that we came across comparing traditional and strategic board agendas. So it's so important. Who says the board agenda? I think it's the chairperson talking to the director, isn't it? And so it becomes important as well when we're setting these board agendas to see to what extent is it a strategic agenda. If we look at our traditional board agendas, you'll have the welcome, you'll go through previous meetings, minutes of the previous meeting, the executive board director will then give a report, then your finance committee and other committees all presenting their reports as well. And then you discuss new business and maybe adjourn, and this could take 2 to 3 hours, or sometimes even 4 hours that you're undergoing. Maybe if we look at the other side, a suggested strategic agenda. So you can start with your welcome and opening thoughts. So you can already see just from this start. Just getting different board members to be giving their opening thoughts each meeting already means, I think you're already tapping in to your board members, getting them to think, and that's already, I think, starting to think a little more strategically. It's key for organizations to make sure that they provide the information to board members beforehand. It is the duty of board members, I think, to make sure you go through these documents so that you're not spending time in the meeting going through the document. So you can see a consent agenda could be then employed, where then you then consent to all those things that you would otherwise maybe take time going over one by one. So there has to be, I think, acceptance of items. What's on our consent agenda? Then we all agree on that, and then an action is agreed upon. What is the action that we need? So you can see there in the example, an action to be approved change of signatory on bank forms, for example. In each meeting, is there a strategic initiative
Mr. K?
that we're looking at? Yeah, am I back?
Your network was a bit bad when you were speaking about bank signatories, so I think if you could take up from that line.
All right, so that's just a consent agenda, but key to then bring out the action. So what is the action that's needed so that people understand before the meeting what it is they're going to be expected to act on. But also always ensuring you are discussing some sort of strategic issues. So you can actually then set out before the meeting, we want to discuss this strategic initiative. And then you can then what that is and point it out and then have people prepare for it as well. I like the way to end this meeting. What's keeping you up at night? So you just have a brainstorming session where then board members put their input into what are future issues that you think as a board you need to be looking at. And if you're looking at this sort of agenda, I think you're looking at a shorter meeting, richer discussion on strategic priorities for the organization. So I thought this was a really useful tool in guiding us in preparing for our meetings and making sure that we're covering aspects that are key, and we're not using board members' time and their expertise to discuss in a lot of things that management could itself agree on or deliberate on. So yeah, that was just my contribution. I think I was really just adding on to a lot of what Tsitsi said. But I think it's so important to reflect as a person yourself. I mean, sometimes we blame organizations a lot, but even yourself as an individual, before you accept, being included on a board member, think about it. What value are you adding? Should I really enter this board? It's not just about your CV. I think it's also a lot about the value that you can bring to an organization as well. So thank you for that. I hope there were a few further insights in there. And Michelle, I can hand back to you now.
I don't know, should we get into question and answer segment? Or should we give Dr. Luke the opportunity to speak to us?
I think let's do Dr.
I will
Luke. Can we do Dr. Luke's presentation? Then we just do questions at once. Dr. Luke, I'm not sure what you think.
I think, yeah, we should go ahead and I'll do a presentation and then deal with the questions after.
Okay, fantastic.
Please, can I get some love and celebrations for Mr. Midzi's contributions before we move? Someone is asking for a 2-minute break. I don't know with the time that we have if we... Let's
go ahead, Michelle, 2 minutes. 2-minute break.
Okay, so let's get back at 11:37.
Yes, while Dr. Luke sets up his presentation.
Okay. All right, welcome back everyone. My name is Michelle Kwati, and today we have a panel of 3 learned experts. We have Tsitsi Maradze, who was our first presenter, and then followed by Kudzai Midzi, and now we are going to give the platform to Dr. Luke. I think Dr. Luke, you can continue. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm not sure, is everyone able to see my presentation? Is everyone able to see the PowerPoint presentation on screen?
Yes, maybe if you could also enlarge it so that we view the full presentation.
Okay.
The icon on your left, your far left.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Please be reminded that to keep your mics on mute all the time so that we don't distract the facilitator. Thank you. Dr. Luke, you can proceed.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this seminar, in this webinar, and for allowing me to share a few thoughts about the role of the board in NGOs. I have had a bit of experience in working in an NGO and see a few of the things that I'm going to talk about. And I've also had the opportunity to work in Zimbabwe for a number of years, and I witnessed quite a lot of the dynamics within the NGO sector. At the time when I was working for DFID in Zimbabwe, I remember we funded the preparation of an NGO corporate governance manual. I don't know the extent to which it is still being applied or used in Zimbabwe, but there is a framework for at least dealing with some of the things that we are talking about today. I've also worked in a number of other countries where I see similar challenges, and I think it is some of the things we are talking about are not unique to Zimbabwe. They are actually true in many other countries in Africa and in Asia. So, and also I have one example here at the end of the presentation, which I would share with you. It's not unique to developing countries. Even here, you still have problems of a similar nature. So I hope with these points, we'll be able to answer a few questions at the end. So first of all, I thought I should unpack the NGO label. We talk about NGOs as if it's one thing, but actually, my understanding is that you could still be an NGO even if you are operating in different kind of legal frameworks. So the first one is the fact that you are registered as a non-governmental organization under the Private Voluntary Organization Act, and this is in Zimbabwe. Or you could be operating under the Trust Deeds Registries Act, or you could just be operating as a common law universitas, which is something that happens in most of the sort of community-based organizations, where it's just enough to have a constitution and some kind of written agreement on your terms of reference and what you are setting yourselves up to do. Or you could also operate under a company limited by guarantee, Section 21. But the common thing is that you are not owned by the government, you are not controlled by the government or the state. So you have a community or a group of people who have a collective objective of serving or servicing themselves in one way or the other. And so you constitute yourselves into a kind of organization that enables you to do the work you want to do. So it is important to understand these frameworks, because whilst we talk about NGOs, there are actually a number of other requirements in terms of, for example, the Private Voluntary Organization Act. There are specific things that are expected the board to do under that piece of legislation. Equally, under the Deeds Registries Act, you are also expected to do certain things under that law. And under the common law universitas, you are equally expected to do a certain number of things, although it's not governed by a specific statute, but nevertheless, you are expected to live up to certain standards. So it is important that we keep this in mind as we talk about NGOs. It's not one thing, it's a kind of a number of legal frameworks that may be in operation. And so I think some of the NGOs in Zimbabwe are actually operating under different legal frameworks. So the context, I'm going to talk about NGOs under the specific context in Zimbabwe. I believe that there is a huge demand for NGO intervention in Zimbabwe. And this is because there is evidence that there is systemic state failure on many fronts, including failure to observe human rights. So we have a number of NGOs that are operating within the human rights sphere, trying to defend the human rights and promote human rights and support human rights organizations under the aegis of the constitution, the country's constitution, or the UN Charter. So we have NGOs that are operating in that space because there is a demand for someone to speak about human rights in Zimbabwe. There is also evidence that there is state failure or government failure on basic service delivery, that is health, education, energy, infrastructure, on shelter, transport, and so forth. So some NGOs are there operating to provide a service that the state or the government is failing to provide. And there's also evidence that there is state failure to protect some of the vulnerable people, the orphans and vulnerable populations, elderly people, and so forth. We have NGOs that are operating in this space in trying to service the vulnerable people. There's also a lack of transparency and accountability across the public sector. So a few of the NGOs are actually trying to help the government to see some of the blind spots, as it were, and also to call out the government whenever they are actually failing to disclose or to deal with issues of corruption. So these state failures require strong citizens' voices and demand for accountability. So the demand for NGO services in Zimbabwe is quite huge because of these failures by the government and the state. So it's important to recognize that NGOs are not just mushrooming because they want to make money. There is a demand for NGOs to operate and to help the government kind of set the country on a path of growth and equitable development. Let's look at the NGO viability. I look at NGO viability at about 3 levels. So the first one is at political level. Can they be allowed to exist, and can they be allowed to function as per their design? How much political space is available for the NGOs to actually do what they are set out to do? The second one is the service level. Do they have the leadership, the capability, and the mechanisms for delivering services effectively, efficiently, and economically? So we need to look at the role of the board in making sure that the service level is consistent with the mandate of the organization. At financial level, do they operate with maximum transparency and accountability? I think both Tsitsi and Kudzai have spoken about some of the internal requirements for the board to go on top of the finances in the organization. And the NGO boards should be held to account on how they are actually overseeing the operations of these 3 levels. And my talk this morning is going to perhaps focus more on the political level, because NGOs are finding themselves with limited space to do some of the things that they were set up to do. And the role of the board in speaking for the organization and for management and for representing the interest of the NGO when talking to the government and other stakeholders. I think some of the NGOs are now required to register at district level, at provincial level, at national level. And there's a myriad of reporting requirements, and government agencies at different levels will just be coming in and checking on what they are doing, and they have to be held to account at all those levels. In some cases, that leaves management quite exposed because they can be intimidated. So what is the role of the board in trying to protect management of the NGO and the rest of staff who are doing their work? Let me just highlight some of the NGO accountability challenges. Some of the NGOs lack clear ownership or ultimate control points. And when you see an NGO, who actually owns an NGO, who sets it up? When there is failure in an NGO, who is the person to take action on the NGO? And when we want to deal with the malpractices in an NGO, who do we talk to? So there are issues around ownership of NGOs and how they are controlled. Some of the NGOs are membership driven, so it may be easier to just work with the members on correcting the NGO, and so you can reset the organization by working with the members of the organization. There are some NGOs that are entrepreneur driven. In other words, somebody just thought, I need to support this area, but I need a vehicle for doing that. So they set up an NGO They call upon a few friends who become members of the board, and they recruit people to work for the NGO. Essentially, it's an NGO, but in effect, it is actually a private venture in the sense that it is the person who started the organization who is driving it. And so you have a situation in which that person who is leading the organization has more power, both formal and informal, over the board members. So the board members are just tokenistic. They are just there to fulfill the legal requirements. Otherwise, the organization is being run by the entrepreneur. And then the board members are based on popularity instead of individual capacity to contribute. I think when I joined the meeting when Tsitsi was making her final sort of slides, and she spoke about some of the members who are on the board by virtue of being friends with X and Y and so forth. So it's a challenge when you see board members who are on the board by virtue of being friends. How do you deal with that? Because clearly they are not going to be there to fulfill the role of board members, but to fulfill the role of the person who put them there. Sometimes there is collusion between NGO management and the NGO board. I remember a time when I was working for Coopers and Lybrand, and we had audits of NGOs, and we used to come across cases of board members who allowed the chief executive or the national director to take assets that belong to the organization, because the executive director also allowed the board members to get away with certain things in the organization. So there was collusion. The NGO board getting something from the executive director, and the executive director being allowed to do certain things. And when that happens, the question is, who can deal with that? Who can challenge them and change the way things are done? I think I also heard people talk about the need for assessing or evaluating board members. Sometimes there isn't a systematic way of doing it. And so these are some of the challenges that NGOs face when you are looking at the effectiveness of the boards. We have a situation in Zimbabwe and in many other countries as well, that government is constantly making allegations that some NGOs are operating outside their mandate, that they are misusing resources and are becoming almost like private businesses operating without transparency and accountability. At the same time, NGOs are also making allegations of corruption and abuse of office, abuse of public resources, and lack of transparency and accountability within the public sector. So we have a situation in which NGOs are looking at government and saying, you government, you are not doing what you are expected to do. And the government is looking at the NGOs and saying, you are not doing what you are expected to do. And the question is, how are we going to resolve this tension between the government and the NGO sector? We all know that government ultimately carries the day because they have political and legal power. They supervise the NGOs. So ultimately, they always use their power to deal with the NGOs, but the NGOs cannot deal with the government in a similar way. So we should kind of take that into account when we look at how board members can protect the NGOs that they are leading. In this case, the government may also be motivated by other things, like when you are exposing corruption in government, they may want to shut down the NGO, even if you are doing your work properly. So we need to see if the board can do certain things to protect NGOs that are operating in that space. So the NGO board has a role to play in upping the game, in upholding highest ethical standards, transparency and accountability, to make sure that when the government sends their inspectors to NGOs, they actually don't come up with any evidence of those things happening. And the board is the most important part of this equation, because they have got to make sure that they're supervising management. Management have to make sure that their staff are also doing the right things. So if the board is not effective, the executive director and management and the rest of staff are likely to be exposed to some of these allegations that are made by government, because they may be found to be true in the organization. I think I've read many articles in Zimbabwe newspapers where the government would find certain NGOs guilty of certain things because they send their inspectors and they come up with the evidence. It is the role of the board to make sure that they are upholding the highest ethical standards and that they are actually supervising the executive director together with staff on what they are doing. So in this case, the board will need to translate the tension between the government and the NGOs into some sort of mutual accountability relationship. How do they do this? When you are choosing someone to be chairperson of an NGO board, you need to think about what is this person's standing in society, in the community, in the country. Look for someone who has potential to create productive and strategic relationships. It's not everyone who can become a chairperson of a board. You have to look at someone who has value to add to the organization. I think Kudzai spoke about everyone having to think about what they bring to the organization. It is so important. Some people who are made chairperson of a board may not be able to actually carry the task because they are just not capable. They don't have the capacity to do that. So when you are choosing someone to be chairperson of the board, think about the broader relationship with the community, with society, with the government. Somebody who can broker a productive and strategic relationship with the government would be a good person to have as chairperson of the board. And I think this is important because it's not about just having the numbers to say we have enough people who voted for X to become chairperson. Think seriously about what that person is going to bring to the board. So let's look at some of the board obligations. The NGO boards should have good balance of skills and influence. I think both Kudzai and Tsitsi have spoken to this point before. They should hold the NGO management to account and follow the enabling the enabling constitution or legislation. It is your ultimate defense when the government is attacking you. So when the government is making allegations against an NGO, your ultimate defense is being clean. If you are clean, nothing sticks. So the NGO board has a role to make sure that their NGO is sparkling clean. That is so important. So you have got all the things that Kudzai and Tsitsi talked about in terms of the internal makings of the organization. But at a strategic level, the board leadership is so important to make sure that those things are actually happening as they should, and the organization is clean, and that it's fulfilling its mandate, and everything they are doing is true to the letter. So it is important for the board to have this strategic position. The NGO board members should be engaged and reach out to external stakeholders, communicating the objectives of the organization, and receive some feedback from different stakeholders on how things should change in the organization. so that when they are speaking in board meetings, they are not just speaking their opinions, they are also bringing the evidence of what the communities and the government are expecting from the NGO. So it's a kind of productive relationship that they will be creating with the outside world. And board meetings should be based on formal reports submitted ahead of meeting. I think both Kudzai and Tsitsi spoke about this. I remember there were times when in board meetings, you see documents being presented, but board members would not have been given the chance to read the reports and actually prepare for questions or for discussion. So if reports are not submitted in time, then obviously the meetings are not productive because there's not much to talk about if people don't know what is in the report. And board committees should make sure that they are also active by picking up specific things under their terms of reference in between the full board meetings. And the board members must, this is important. Earlier on, I mentioned that here in the UK, there is a council in which the council clerk, they call them council clerk, was the chief executive or the chief operating officer. This person for 10 years was not submitting audit reports to the council, to the full council. So for 10 years, this person used to run the organization, and the council members were in the council, and as they are also the equivalent of a board. They were not reading the audit reports. He would just give them a summary of what the audit report said. As a result, what happened was he used to take money from the council. Over 10 years, he took something like £250,000 from the council and used it for his private use. And it was only when he died and that they got a new person to come and act in that role, that they were able to learn about all these things that happened over 10 years, because the council or the board was not actually getting into the details of what was happening in the organization in terms of the audit findings and the implications. So it is important that board members actually have full access to the full audit reports so that they can ask the relevant questions. So some of the threats currently to NGOs in Zimbabwe, there are restrictive funding issues, there are restrictive rules about what they can publish. Sometimes you get into trouble for publishing information that is related to your business. So sometimes civil society actors are co-opted into government and party issues, and so you have NGOs that speak for government or against the government, and it pollutes the environment for NGO effectiveness. And sometimes it rallies, people make threats against certain NGOs, and some NGO staff may be arrested and sent to prison without trial for long periods of time and so forth. This is the kind of space that is in Zimbabwe. And it is so important that board members are actually helping to preserve this space by making sure that they are following all the ethical practices, and that in fact they are making sure the NGO is doing what they are formed to do, and that they are doing so without any malice or favor or hate or anything. They're supposed to supervise management to make sure that the mandate of the organization is clear to everyone. If it is an NGO dealing with human rights, yes, they should deal with human rights, but must make sure that internally everything is clean. if it is disagreement on the substance of what must be shared and so forth, then it is easy to deal with that in a court of law. But it is important that you are, as an NGO, found clean in terms of your operations. So some of the board responses could be, they need, at least the board members need to strengthen local trust and the relationships with the communities, make sure they are also participating in fundraising, talking to different funding agencies. If you are going to, there are those people who are dealing with city issues. I've seen them taking up lawsuits and so forth. Sometimes you need to combine with other NGOs so that you take your litigation at a strategic level. You are not exposing yourself as a single NGO. So it is important that as a chairperson or board member, you speak to other board members of other NGOs and you explore opportunities for working together and sticking to raise your voice together as a bigger group. Increase internal and external accountability so that accusations don't stick. And it's also important to tag on state obligations that the government has already acceded to. So for those dealing with human rights, there are certain things that the government of Zimbabwe has already acceded to, and you need to be aware of these things so that when you speak on the basis of existing government commitments. You are not creating anything new, but you are simply saying you have already ratified this and that and that, and this is what we are expecting you to do, and this is why we are doing what we are doing. It is also important to forge wider civil society NGO partnerships, join umbrella organizations so that at your level, you leverage your capacity alongside other similar organizations, and that way you have a much bigger voice, and it's more difficult for the government to target you as an NGO. And the boards must operate clean NGOs to survive threats and so forth, as I have said, and there must never be any traces of corruption. So in conclusion, and perhaps as today's takeaways, I want to say that NGO boards need to have balance of skills, influence, and must be seen to have substance and not tokenistic. Both the executive director and staff must look up to the boards for leadership and must actually receive that leadership. Representation to government and in talking to government and to communities and so on, to development partners, that is important. NGO boards are the stakeholder representatives and must uphold the integrity of the NGO. It is so important that the NGO's integrity is not questioned. The NGO boards must engage with the external stakeholders to communicate and receive feedback, as I've said. NGO boards need to take some of the political flag directed at management. There's nothing wrong in a chairperson of an NGO board meeting with local MPs and talking to them, making sure that you are not naive about the politics in a particular area. You should not participate in the politics, but you should understand the politics. So as a chairperson or as a board member, you should interact with the political actors, the MPs, and so forth, so that you are also sensitizing them, giving them a fair view of why you are doing what you are doing. And they could also end up being your representatives who can talk to other higher authorities about the importance of what you are doing in your local area. The NGO management must have robust communication strategies and making sure that you respond strategically to accusations from government. You just don't shout back to government or be seen to be picking up a fight with the government. You must be very strategic in your communication. You should, the NGO boards should provide the moral high ground to speak on things like government accountability, any state excesses or failures. It's important that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So when you are speaking about government failures, you have to be very strategic about what or how you communicate that information. And this is the role of the board to make sure that they are taking that high moral ground, but speaking strategically about the government failures. That way you are managing the relationship for the purpose of preserving the space you are operating in, and you don't get accused of, for example, picking a side or participating in politics, but you are actually raising important issues, but doing so with respect and with a lot of evidence to support your position. And that way you can actually end up creating a productive relationship with the government. So yeah, for today, I think that's what I thought I should share with you. The important point being that the board members are actually your bridge between the NGO technical operations and the political environment created by the government and the communities. And so it's important that the board is actually equally informed about the internal the internal operations of the NGO and the external environment in which they are operating, the politics of it. That should all be kind of mediated by the NGO board. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luke. Please send some appreciation, thanks, celebration, and love for Dr. Luke. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that session, Dr. Luke. If I can engage you in a couple of questions, that also applies to Tsitsi. Tsitsi, if I can engage you in a couple of questions that we did receive prior to this workshop. If you can assist with this, we have Taka Promise here from Mustard Seed. He had a question: how can NGO board members remain committed and motivated to the mission and vision of the particular organization when most of the time they serve as a volunteer officers? They don't get paid. Are advisory boards effective? Can I retake that question again, Tsitsi, Dr. Luke?
Yeah. Yes, please. Maybe, Michelle, you could actually collect a couple and then we can take turns to respond instead of one at a time to save time. Just an idea.
All right. Okay, so I think we do have a couple of questions here. I think going with Tsitsi's suggestion, I think maybe if we say you can answer the first one and then the second one by Dr. Luke would be, what's the role of the board in fundraising and resource mobilization? The first question was, how can we keep board members committed and motivated as given the fact that most of them are not paid and they work as volunteers?
Shall I? Shall I go first on the fundraising?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is important. This kind of goes to the heart of what the three of us spoke about earlier on. When you join a board, an NGO board, what are your expectations? Why are you joining them? It's a calling. To be serving in an NGO is almost like a calling instead of a career. It is not a career where you are expecting remuneration and things like that. You are doing something because you feel there's a purpose for doing it and that it is important for you to do it. So if you are informed about what is happening in the NGO and the need for the service that the NGO is providing, you have actually the tools with which you can speak to different funding agencies to highlight the importance of putting more resources into what you are doing. So I think this is important because if you do it for money, you will always be asking, so where is the money? If I do this, who is going to pay me? And that way you find that you are limited in terms of your contribution because you don't see that as part of your job. You see that as part of your income. I think that there's a fundamental issue there. To serve as a board member on an NGO means that it's a calling. It's out of your heart. You believe in what the NGO is doing, and that it is important that more resources should be available to do that which you believe in. Of course, it would be nice if all board members could receive some sort of payment for what they do, but we all know that NGOs don't make money. They actually receive money from different well-wishers. So that's the context.
Thanks, Dr. Luke. Can I also contribute?
Yes, thank you.
Apologies once again. I've got a very, I'm recovering from a serious bout of flu, so I'm sorry for such a croaky voice. So for me, Michelle, I have tended to be committed to remain on a board where we actually are true to each other and to the essence of what we stand for. And therefore, it means where we have collectively had to make tough decisions, for example, about firing the director, and we collectively agree to that and we do it with integrity, I have been very motivated and committed to continue to serve on such a board. I've also been committed, like Luke has alluded to a board and an organization which are aligned to my calling, my duty to serve. And if we remain true to that and the extent to which our decisions as a board are actually respected and enforced, I have continued, I think, to serve on that kind of a board. So when you talk about commitment, it's really also personal. And the extent to which I am motivated, I guess, is a direct correlation to the extent to which my contribution has also been equally respected and taken seriously. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for those contributions. We have another one here, and their particular concern lies in the way in which they work in relation to committee members. So my colleague here asks, is it logical and good to have committee members unchanged for 40 plus years?
I'll quickly take that. I've already alluded to it. That is typical of a larger than life board that I characterized earlier. To me, when you actually have a board member sitting on a board that long, there's something fundamentally wrong with the organization and the board itself. And therefore, I think based on what we have shared in this webinar, I think the organizations affected and individuals can actually make a more deliberate determination, either to step down or to volunteer to leave, but doing it in such a way that you don't create dysfunction or a gap in the business of the organization. I think it's important that your legal provisions are actually applied so that you don't end up with such a situation. And if you don't have a constitution, or if you don't have a trust deed that sort of gives you the legal standing, I think it would be a good place to start. You have one without delay. Like Luke has alluded to, increasingly NGOs in Zimbabwe are going to face challenges, especially also if the NGO bill that has been hanging is enforced, because that bill is going to sanction a lot of things, including the same issues that we're discussing. To what extent are you relevant? To what extent are you complying with your own governance documents and provisions in that sense? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tsitsi. Mavis, I do see your hand,
I,
but
I could just add one small thing on to what Tsitsi has said.
yes, thank you, Doc.
I think it's important that your enabling framework, that is the constitution, is very clear about the terms for serving on the board. It is good practice, and it is important that this is included in your legal framework, that a board member serves for a limited term of office. So you might serve 2 or 3 terms of maybe 2 years or 1 year, it depends on what you want, but make sure it's very clear in your enabling environment, enabling framework, that you serve on a board for a limited period of time. So the first time it has to be renewed based on your performance. Second time, renewed if it is necessary. Otherwise, there must be a cap. Above that, you should not continue to be on the board, because you don't need, it must not be personal, it must be institutional. You should not have to be told to leave the organization. You should leave because the constitution says it's time to leave. That is important.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Luke, for that contribution. Another one from a good friend of mine. She says, where do we draw a line between the board chair and the country director in terms of how people conduct themselves and doing their jobs?
Let me just say something about that. The chairperson is not executive. The chairperson is like is overseeing the work of the executive. So management is the executive director and other senior people in the organization, and the chairperson is representing. The chairperson and board members are representing the stakeholders, the outsiders. So the person who runs the organization is the executive director with management and the rest of staff, but their operations are overseen by the executive board. So by the NGO board. So it's important that the terms of reference are very clear about what are executive functions and what are the board functions. Otherwise, if it's not written down, then you continue to have people interfering in each other's roles, and that is very unhealthy, actually. You end up having maybe the executive director fired because the chairperson thinks they should have been doing that themselves. So we find in some NGOs, the chairperson wants to be given a company, an NGO vehicle to use, which is clearly a major sticking point when you think about it. So it's important that in the terms of reference, and there should be terms of reference, it's clear what are board functions, what are executive functions.
If I can just add one point also, what I've also come to learn and realize is that for international NGOs also, their boards are also further sanctioned by other sort of global policies of that institution. And therefore, it's an issue, I think, of balancing the institutional culture with what the in-country context like Zimbabwe would also dictate. So this needs to be discussed internally, and the other board members making sure that they too are equally sanctioned and guided by those policies, including the country policy as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to our panelists. Mavis, please, can you go ahead? I think your hand is tired. I think it's been up for a long time.
Hello, thank you. Actually, I joined a bit late this morning. I got an invitation this morning, so I didn't manage to send my question. I would like to know what are the implications for a PVO becoming a membership organization, and how does the board give advice, give recommendations in such a situation? That's my take. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the presentations we got from Dr. Luke, Kuti, and Tsitsi. Thank you.
Let me go first, Babes. I'm not sure I really understood the question. If a private voluntary organization becoming a membership organization, it could still be a private voluntary organization based, as a membership organization. So I'm not sure they are mutually exclusive. You could still be a private voluntary organization, but being a membership organization. That is possible in my view. I don't see any contradiction there, unless she is talking about ceasing to be an NGO but becoming a business. Is that what you are saying?
Yes, it does. I'm also looking at that. Like I'm talking of an organization that registered without membership and then decides to have membership and also have a business on the side. What are the implications? What advice can you give? Thank you. If you choose to become a membership organization, there should be no problem in you going ahead because that's internal, but it shouldn't change the mission and purpose of your organization, does it? It doesn't. So you can still continue with your mission and purpose as a membership organization. You have simply changed the internal dynamics in terms of how you are organized internally. But if you then choose to change mission and become a business organization, in other words, you are now earning money, then it changes your status as a non-governmental organization. You become pretty much a business, and in which case your standing as an NGO would be affected because you are now subject to things like corporate tax and things like that. And you might have to shift from the PVO Act to the Companies Act because you are now running a business. That's my view.
And to add, I think in terms of the board position or role, I think it's also important to then review your governance documents. Because when you're an NGO, I guess your legal persona was requiring you to appoint board members in a particular way, from recruitment to their tenure and their roles and responsibility. But when you become a membership organization, you need now to review and check how are you going to then transition your board to reflect the new form that you are in, and also whether you would want a certain procedure to be followed so that maybe your board is also deriving from the membership that you have. So you then need to revisit those governance documents and make that very clear. And to the extent even of saying who would then become eligible to be on that board, and how do you then transition? Do you then, for example, allow every member at some point in time to also have a seat on the board or not? What are some of the challenges that I find with membership-based organizations to say, how do you even select the board members? And do you then make everyone eligible to be a member? When you also then compare that with the need to have the necessary experience, competencies, and so forth and so on. So you then need to review and refine and align your governance documents to reflect your membership form that you would have assumed at that point in time.
All right. Thank you very much. I think due to our time constraints, I'm just going to take one more question. I see we have a hand from Nyaradzai Kumbonjanda. Please take to the platform and share your contribution with us. So sorry for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, moderator. And again, my appreciation to all the presenters, very, very informative. I'd put my question in the chat. I'm really interested in community philanthropy and how we start to also evolve ways of organizing built on our own other opportunities as Zimbabweans, as Africans. And I run Rosaria Memorial Trust that we founded in honor of my late mother, of our late mother. And it's an issue that we are discussing within our board, but we really would like to learn what are the practices in the country or in the region around family foundations, community trusts, or family foundations, because we see different standards being applied when we are in the global south and those in the global north. How do we manage the dynamics within governance to ensure we do not have conflict of interest, the succession, but we also know that those same tools are not as fully applied in the global north. So what experiences do you have which we can draw from? Because it's an approach we want to encourage for family trusts as part of community giving. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Let me just say a few things. I'm not sure I could competently answer that question fully. I think foundations tend to, I mean, the idea is there must be perpetuity in organizations, and there must be succession, there must be transition, there must be predictability, there must be certainty about things, and things must go beyond personalities because we come and go and so forth. So it's creating an institutional framework that allows things to continue well after we are gone. And I think if you look at the big foundations in the US, for example, they created endowment funds. So the capital for this non-profit making organization is actually put in the form of an endowment fund. I don't know the legislation in Zimbabwe with respect to endowment funds, But I think the idea is to capitalize a non-profit making organization so that there is capital that will continue to exist beyond the individuals in place at any time. And that the organization has structures which can renew themselves. So when somebody steps down as a chairperson or as a chairperson or as an executive director, there is a system for putting a new person, whether that person, those persons are of one family or they are also drawn from the communities around them. That's entirely a matter for the individuals who studied the foundation to answer. But it's important that it's all captured and institutionalized in a legal framework which allows funding to be put in place, management succession to take place, hiring of staff to happen, and for control of the organization to remain within the kind of anticipated groups of people. I think we in our sort of African context, succession is not always seen as a positive thing. Sometimes it's seen as a threat. If I talk about succession, people might say, well, are you already foreseeing my death? Are you planning my death? You know, that kind of stuff. But it's important that we institutionalize things by having them written down, and this funding issue in particular should be put in place, and control of the assets, including the buildings. I think I follow the Rosario Memorial Trust quite a lot on social media, and I'm very impressed. Thank you very much for that initiative. You are actually pioneering that it is happening in the middle of a rural setup. It's important you deal with the issues of land tenure where you are based, for example. What is your relationship with the council, and what is the tenure of the land tenure for the foreseeable future, and who would control those buildings and maintain them, funding for this and that. It's all part of institutionalizing things, and I don't believe it's an easy kind of solution, but I think you are by forming the trust, you have already put in the seed. What you need is just to continue building the institutional framework, the trust deed itself, and making sure that there are provisions for the endowment and for succession.
The only addition I would make, Nyaradze, is to say, perhaps also look at the operational side and make sure that you have the necessary systems and policies to guide the operations, like Luke has alluded to. Because I'm sure you actually have certain values that you'd also want respected, regardless of who is in the driving seat. So you need to reduce it in writing so that it's also very clear and it's not assumed what values you ascribe to, and also how you expect them to be lived, both at the operational level as well as at the governance level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nyaradze, for the question. Thank you very much, Tsitsi and Dr. Luke, for all those contributions. I think if we had the time, we would go on and on and on, but unfortunately, time is not on our side. So thank you very much, everyone. I really enjoyed this session. I am going to hand over to Mr. Midzi so that he can do a summary and so that we can close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, everyone, for taking part. I'd like to thank Tsitsi and Dr. Luke for the wonderful presentations and the great insights that you gave. I think there was so much to learn for everyone. what we're going to do, I think there's still so many questions we received that we didn't get the time to respond to. So we're going to then just respond to the questions and share that with the presentations that we'll give the participants. We have email addresses for everyone who registered. A lot of people were actually not able to join because we have 100-person limit on the package. So we have lots of people asking for the recording. So we'll share the recording, the handout, and also then just the question and answers that people have. But if at an organizational level, you still want to look at this more and interrogate more what sort of assistance you can get around your governance systems, please get in touch and we can talk and see how to help you. I'm sure Tsitsi and Dr. Luke are also available. So please reach out and we're there to assist in whatever way we are. I think governance is so important. If we can get that right, then you're more likely to have a sustainable organization running and then making the kind of impact we want in our communities. So thank you everyone for getting in touch. We shall share the contacts as well when we share the slides for Dr. Luke and Tsitsi as well, so you can get in touch with them. Thank you everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Get well soon, Tsitsi.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
Thanks.
very much
Thank you,
for the
everyone.
wonderful
Cheers. Have a
dinner.
good day.
Stay
Bye.
blessed.
Thank you, everyone.